well so far. So, first of all, thank you so much for doing this for me.
Absolutely.
You are chapter 7 out of 8, so I'm pretty psyched. And my first St. Louisan.
Okay.
So, could you go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about what Web Sanity is and what your role is in the company?
Sure. So Web Sanity is a small website development company in St. Louis. My role is a partner. Since there's only three of us, I end up wearing multiple hats. It's been that way for some time. So I primarily do um, website UX design, the industrial design portion of the design process, planning, app planning, project management, client communication, information architecture, that kind of stuff. In addition, I do all of the display layer coding, so I do all the HTML and CSS for the
Okay.
sites that we do.
Okay. So what's your background? How'd you get into this field?
Yeah, my background is that I backed into it. I have a BS in photography.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I have a BS in photography. I expected to get into some sort of technical photography field, such as working for a hospital or maybe law enforcement or something like that in some industrial photography realm. And as I transitioned into digital imagery and manipulation and enhancement on computers, that's right at the cusp of the internet, and I got distracted by this thing called the World Wide Web and had a fork in the road after college and self-taught.
Do you, well, how would you describe that? I mean, just the beginning of the web. My first website that I made was probably like 96-ish.
Hmm. Yep.
So, I mean, what was your experience like with your first website that you ever
Right.
made?
So it's the same time frame. I had was introduced by Scott Graneman to the
Hmm.
web. He pointed out some web pages and said, "Hey, here's this cool new publishing platform. Um, Check it out." And really just kind of at that time it was very easy to look under the hood. So we just viewed the page source. There was nothing besides the page source going on to learn how to build web pages. And at that point in time, it was extremely simple. It was
Hmm.
very basic compared to web development today.
Hmm.
So I had the advantage of entering in a time that was much simpler to pick up and learn on the go. Um, that's it.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, just viewing the page source, you got everything.
Yep. Yep. Um,
And so you mentioned, web development, HTML, CSS. What other languages do you have experience with? And, why have you grown your area of expertise in these areas?
let's call it pretty much that's it. HTML and CSS is really where I have my experience. I'm one of those kind of people that when it comes to other programming languages, with programming languages, um, I'm not a developer, but I can fake it sometimes. I
Hmm.
can poke around in other people's code and pull it apart. Um, but I'm definitely not a programmer. So I've always focused on HTML, CSS, and I've found that there's plenty of room there to develop expertise and always something to learn. So that's why I've kind of
When
stuck
you
with it.
when you sorry, getting back to your last point when you were saying you're talking about how easy it is to see under the hood, how easy it
Hmm.
was. Why, in your own words, can you just describe why it's gotten so much more complicated? Like why you can't see everything?
Right. So now you have a lot more JavaScript involvement with websites. So if you just take a look at the source, it might not be what ends up actually being rendered on the page because it gets modified by JavaScript on the fly, and there's all kind of various different kind of state involvement
Hmm.
where the current state of the page might change. So the view source will show you what the code was when it was delivered to the browser, but not how it's changed since the browser's gotten hold of it and modified it via JavaScript.
Got it. Okay. I remember Scott was always very anti-Flash. You guys never did any Flash development, did you? And why not?
No.
Why'd you avoid it?
Well, we didn't do Flash development because we felt that it had a short lifespan.
Wow, that
Um,
was pretty that was pretty good foresight.
Right. Now, when we did do some Flash stuff back when it was Future Splash.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So it was Future Splash, and then it was purchased by Micromedia, and then was renamed to Flash. That was it Macromedia? Yeah,
Hmm.
Macromedia Flash, and then Adobe bought them and went with it. But it was we saw it we ran into lots of problems with it because of the kinds of websites we were building were very informational websites, and Flash was, since it was not native to the web, all the information that was inside of any kind of Flash element on the page was a black box to Google and things like that. They made efforts to make it more transparent later on and more
Hmm.
interactive with the rest of the site, but
Hmm.
it was never a true native thing, and we were like, this is just not going to go anywhere. This is definitely not the future of the web. So we didn't want to develop expertise in something that we felt wasn't going to last.
Do you feel a little sorry for people that did?
Yes, yeah, and that's kind of one of the big changes with the web in general, or one of the things that the web brought on as far as change, is how big companies were able to deliver prepackaged development support to developers. So before the web, most developers did web Microsoft stuff because Microsoft would kind of package it up, put a bow on it, and say, here's your training for developing on computers. Take this course, get this certification, do these things, and you can develop applications. Adobe did much the same thing with Flash. They kind of packaged it up in an authoring platform. They did a really good job of documentation. They kind of packaged it up for people and saying, hey, it's easy to build stuff in Flash. Jump on in and you're going to get expertise very quickly. Um, and so I saw that as a problem, and I felt sorry for a lot of people that were like, hey, great, I can learn Flash. I don't have to learn these other things
Hmm.
that are kind of foundational web stuff because I have all of this, and this is so much easier to learn. I don't have to dig through these obtuse spec docs,
Right.
from W3C and figure out all this stuff that's not written for learning purposes at all.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, I did feel sorry for people that jumped into Flash.
Um, what about, I know that you guys, Web Sanity, one of the cool things that you guys do is you host all of your own clients on your own server, and you also offer them your own proprietary content management system. How did that whole system evolve for you guys?
Well, it's actually not a proprietary content management
Oh,
system.
okay.
It's an open source content management system called Concrete 5. We've extended it, so we have some proprietary add-ons that we've added
Hmm.
for things that we felt were missing from the base content management system. Um, but our major motivation in choosing that content management system was the business model of providing web services. So instead of building a site, what we call love them and leave them developers, where we say, hey, here's your site all built up. I installed it on this web host provider that you have. See you later. Good luck with that. And then you kind of start taking care of the animal after that point in time. We felt it was best to provide those services of maintaining the server environment and updating the software and monitoring for security, providing ongoing support. Um, we had been in companies had tried the the previous method before, and it always ended in tears. They would have a change up of personnel, new editors, new people come to the organization, and they have no idea what to do with the site. And so it was typically we would say, build it, give it to them, and after a period of time, it got thrown away and completely replaced. Whereas we find with providing web services, they come back to us and they want changes, and we can then evolve the site, and it lasts much longer, and they're happier and get better services that way.
It also seems like a smarter business model too, because it's ongoing revenue.
It is, um, which is great.
But you
Yeah.
never get really rid of a terrible client.
Never really get rid of a terrible client, and it's not scalable. It's not something that we can scale up and provide a ton of support for large things. So it's always going to be a fairly small company. It's not
Hmm.
something like we can get rich on because we've built this software that we can then sell to thousands of people. We are always going to have a kind of a limited number of people that we can support,
Hmm.
and limited number of people that really want that type of service. Um,
Right.
we run into lots of potential clients that go away because all they want to do is turn on a site, choose a couple choices, drop in an image, and be done. We're very much more of kind of a, you know, custom build the website. Do we do a lot of business analysis when we go in? So we do interviewing the clients and various stakeholders and come up with a site plan that
Hmm.
lives on the site in the dashboard, so they can say, this is why we made these decisions and this is what we did. So
Right. Okay, so you guys were very smart about sticking with HTML and CSS. What about any mistakes along the way? I mean, in terms of directions that you went for a while and
Right,
any epic fails?
right. No epic fails in the moment.
Hmm.
In hindsight, we go, "Oh my gosh, what we were thinking." You know,
Yeah.
what's going on there? Um, the craziest one was an idea to use frame sets for
Oh,
layout purposes. So way back when,
I remember frames.
yeah, we had very little control over layout of the page. So you really either had tables or nothing early on, and then frame sets got introduced, and I said, hey, now you can have independently scrolling in independent ports of the page. Let's use this for actual framing and layout purposes. It got massively complex. It worked, but it was just a nightmare to try to maintain.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, what do you,
so
oh, go ahead.
the other ones were ill-conceived notions from our primary client way back then. It was a large company, Anheuser-Busch, and we had a couple successes early on, and then every manager within the marketing department climbed out because they wanted magical things to happen for the web. So that was at a time, we still see it a little bit now, but was really common back in the 90s that somebody would say, oh, well, the web is magic. If you put something up there, it'll be magically successful. So they
Hmm.
would take an ill-conceived project, think that the web is going to give it some sort of magical turbo boost, put it on the web, and then of course it would just, lay an egg. There'd be nothing, nobody would care about it or go to it or anything would happen.
Right, you can build it, but people won't necessarily come to it.
Correct. Correct.
Um, what was I going to ask you? Oh, I wanted to get back to working with clients and domain names. Do you have any stories about registering domains? I mean, early on, I know that one of my early clients forgot to register their domain, renew their domain name.
Yeah.
Any bad choices or bad registrations or having to buy the domain for a large amount of money for a company or anything like that?
Yeah. Over the past, there was a couple lost domains.
Uh-huh.
So we'd have clients that were hesitant to have us maintain and update the domain. So typically, what we would suggest is, hey, tell you what, we'll register your domain. We'll make sure that gets renewed. If you need the context updated, we manage the domain registration and DNS. But sometimes clients want to do it themselves for whatever reason, and we'll fumble the ball and just not renew it. And we don't get any of the notifications because we're not on the contacts. And then we'll get a panicked phone call. My website's down, and we'll look and say, oh, your domain is expired. It's been some time since a domain is lost because they added a grace period.
Right.
So I can't add a 90-day grace period to renew the domain even after it's expired and taken down. Nobody can register it right out from under you. But way back in the day, yeah, that happened where it went away and then boom, it got snaked. And
Yeah.
I don't think we ever had anybody recover the domain. They had to switch to a new domain.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Now that was a long time ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
There were some big companies
Yeah.
that did that as
Yeah.
well.
Nothing particularly entertaining or
Yeah.
or
um,
interesting about the domain stuff.
what do you think has been the most exciting evolution in terms of web technology? Re-
Um, well, just the newer layout mechanisms is a big thing for me. So
Bootstrap, you mean?
no, I'm talking about Flexbox
Hmm.
and grid layout. So one of the things many people don't understand about the web, and I would say most or many developers still don't understand about the web, is it's a document-oriented infrastructure. It was designed to display text on the page that's hyperlinked to other text. And there was no layout methods built into the web until Flexbox, probably.
Hmm.
Before that, the closest thing you had was floats. So float was simply to get text to wrap around an image was the intention. And so up until Flexbox, everything that you did for layout was a hack. So previously you used tables for layout, but tables were never intended for layout. They were intended to present tabular data that was in columns and rows. And for a long time, you just used that for layout. And then you switched to floats.
Hmm.
I mean, Bootstrap 3 even, used floats for creating a grid. Floats were never intended for that purpose at all. The purpose was to wrap text around, to usually a figure or an image of some sort, and was never intended for any other kind of layout. And now we have Flexbox, was definitely intended for layout, and grid. So those are really big things, and it's mind blowing that it hasn't come until now.
Right,
And
right.
it's really right now that it's happened. So all of the fancy layout you've seen up until the last few years has been 100% hack, using methods that were never intended for layout purposes, which is mind blowing. It's insane.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing to me, because that's my realm. Is finally we have some mechanisms that are specifically intended for page layout.
Um, well, what do you think? What are you excited to see in the future?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, One of the things that I've seen, and I'm blanking on the name of it. Oh, what is it called? I'm gonna look it up. And I'm blanking on the name of it. It's coming up in the future. It's the ability to have compiled apps running natively in the browser.
Okay, so explain what that means.
That you have code that's running in the browser that's not getting interpreted on the fly like JavaScript. So you can actually build a compiled app that's um, res- really performant inside the browser.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I'm trying to find out what that's called. Hey, Bill, is it okay if I ask a friend?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hey, Bill. Yeah. I talked to you about this. I'm blank on the name. What's the name of the web technology coming up where you can actually compile apps in the browser with they run natively in the browser? It's like Web Assembly.
Yeah, there's WebAssembly. It's got its challenges. It's going to be a while.
It's going to be a while,
It's
but
at least 3, if not 5 years.
right. But it's wildly promising as far as performance and like building Photoshop that'll run inside the browser, that kind of
Theoretically.
Right, theoretically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead.
WebAssembly.
Okay, and so what is the potential for WebAssembly?
Right. So the purpose of WebAssembly is for that, so that you can have like a virtual machine running in the browser that runs stuff natively in the browser without any kind of plug-in architecture or anything like that. So anything that you can't do with any other web technology like JavaScript or whatever, that you're just like, I cannot build this using JavaScript. You could potentially do it with WebAssembly, like a full-fledged like Photoshop style app that would run
Right.
inside the web browser
Wow.
in a very, very performant manner. So that's pretty interesting that that's coming up. It'll be pretty far outside my area expertise when it does. We're moving pretty deep into computer science and programming there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's definitely very new. It's it's
Mm-hmm.
it's in the future for sure. It's not in the now.
That's cool. Well, Jans, I think I got enough content.
Okay,
I
I
think
hope
this
that was
was
helpful.
well, it was perfect. It was, and actually, my last interview. I'm just going to turn off Snag It for a second.
Sure, web, but they never learn why the web was designed this way.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you do it that way? And so when Scott and I teach our classes, we start with that kind of foundational, hey, the web is split into these three languages. This is why they chose to split it into the three languages. This is the role of the languages. This is how these languages were designed to work, and basic concepts, and then get onto the specifics of how to do individual stuff. And over and over and over again, even people that are like, yeah, I'm a web developer. I've been a web developer for 5 years. Lights go on. They're like, oh, I had no idea that's why that works that way.
Are you referring to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript?
Yes.
And so, what do you tell them? Can you tell me kind of briefly?
Well, sure. So that's called the separation of concerns. So
Mm-hmm.
each one of those languages has a different concern that they're focused on and a role to play within a web page. HTML is all about the meaning of the page. It's about what is there. It tells about what things are on the page. This is a heading. This is a paragraph. This is a
Mm-hmm.
list of items that goes in a particular order, an ordered list, that kind of thing. So without looking at it at all, you could or seeing what it looks like, you could understand the structure and the meaning of it. So that's how Google can read a page and say, oh, yes, this is the most important keyword, and here's a list of related items and that kind of stuff. So HTML is all about meaning. CSS is all about presentation. Without CSS, it would all be one unbroken block of text on the page. So even spaces between paragraphs and line breaks are all controlled by CSS. So CSS is all about the presentation and the appearance, and then JavaScript is about the behavior. So the behavior of the page, calculations, animations, transformation, all this other kind of stuff, programmatical, logical stuff is JavaScript. So meaning, appearance, and behavior are the purposes of those three languages. And then, for instance, when we talk about CSS, people oftentimes are like, how do I do this particular thing? And I can tell them, and then they're like, I have no idea why it works that way. So I talk to them about the flow of the page, what the flow is, and what the inline direction and block direction and all this other kind of stuff is, where they understand some basic layout behavior of how it builds, and then again, lights go on.
It takes a lot of, for me, it takes a lot of trial and error, I mean.
That's one of the things that is removed once you understand the basic why it behaves that way. You're like, oh, I bet this happens, and you're more accurate on those guesses.
Right.
So instead of the trial and error going, oh, I'll try this, I'll try that, you're like, okay, I have an educated guess that I think this is probably the way it's supposed to work, and then you end up kind of tweaking a little bit after that. So you have much more educated guesses when you're trying to figure out the layout.
I'm not that clueless all the time.
No, I understand. But we run into that constantly where developers are like, I tried this, I tried this, I tried this, I tried this, and then this one worked, and gosh, now it's worked, I'm done.
Yeah.
And they have no idea why it worked or how to do that again in the future. They're going, I have to look back at what I did before.
Right.
Whereas when they understand why, then like, okay, I know how to do that again.
Right. That makes sense.
So we run into that a lot of, we call it practical knowledge versus theoretic knowledge. Theoretical, so if you understand the theory and the whys, then the hows kind of flow in.
Right.
So
right.
And that's something that's hugely missing in education about web development and design. There's lots of minutia of how to do this, how to do that, how to do this, how to do that, but not a lot of why it works that way.
And really, I mean, you can look up the minutia.
Yeah, you can look up that minutia. It's totally true. And why isn't it taught? I don't know. A lot of it is that it's buried in the specs. In order to understand why it's in this awful to read content and on the W3C specs stuff. And so that's one of the things that I've learned to do is read the specs and understand them.
Yeah.
Because it's like reading a different language.
Yeah.
They're written in a really odd way.
Yeah. Yeah, it is hard to understand from their writing. I agree with you on that. Hey, totally different topic. Do you still have your Dungeons and Dragons site?
No, actually, I sold it.
You did?
Yeah, so
That's
somebody offered me money for it, and I took it because it was way out of date. I wasn't really maintaining it anymore, and so I sold the site. It's still up. If you go to d20srd.org, you can see it's still up, and they've actually extended it to other things, but they haven't changed the design. It's still what it was back when I built it in 2001.
Wow, it's retro.
Yeah, it's very retro. Now I've built an updated one that's not legal that I use for my own purposes.
Oh.
With the newest rules and all that kind of stuff, but that's all under copyright. They didn't open the license up like they did with the old version of the rules, so I can't publish it.
Oh. Huh. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Jans, thanks so much. I caught that last part. I re-recorded that last part, so that's really helpful. That'll actually be helpful in my text.
Okay, good.
So
good.
I appreciate that. Okay. Right. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.